Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA Front Office Show. It's Friday. You know what that means.
Front Office Friday! No basketball for a week edition.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
boo,
now I'm
sad.
just sad.
Yeah, that's all right
So
though.
sad. Yeah.
We'll find
At least
plenty of
now
reasons.
we can preview the finals a little bit. We can talk trades. We can talk free agency. We can talk the draft. We've got a
Yeah.
lot to still discuss. So welcome in, everybody. Joining from YouTube, joining us over on X. We appreciate all of you being here. A lot of stuff for us to dive into today. Keith, I guess let's just start with the Mavericks. Did it? They closed it out, and oh my gosh, it's rare that you see a game where you knew what was going to happen in the first like 5 minutes. And yet in last night's game, that's exactly what happened because you saw the way Luka came out and you went, oh, Luka decided they're not losing. They're not losing tonight. That's it. That the game is done. Luka has decided.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he was great. That game was never close. Even when it looked like at the end of the third, beginning of the fourth, maybe the Wolves were going to make a run, they didn't, and that was it, right? They just didn't even never made a run at it. It never got close, and that was it. So, yeah, I mean, kudos to Dallas. They came out, took the crowd out of it early,
Mm-hmm.
defended their butts off early. Luka carried the offense in the early stages. Then Kyrie picked it up as the game went along, and they just never gave Minnesota even a reasonable thought of, all right, you're going to get back in it. I think they got it maybe as low as 19, maybe at one point in the before the final few minutes, but I don't even know. I don't even know if they get it that low. It might only get down to like 20 or 21, but yeah, it was never really there. And credit to Dallas for moving on now into the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I mean that was an incredible game from Luka. And then you're right about Kyrie. Like it seemed like every time the Wolves they started to ramp up, and you could feel the crowd. Even through your screen, you could feel the crowd's energy. They were just begging and pleading for something to cheer for. Kyrie would step up and then hit a three. And it just like every time they wanted to make that run, Kyrie just went, nope, no, you're not. Not happening. Not happening. Go back to being quiet. And it was an incredible performance. Now, I guess we would be remiss if we didn't say great season for the Timberwolves. Of course,
Sure.
they didn't get to where they wanted to go. They had an opportunity to make it to the finals. It fell short, but Anthony Edwards was determined they will be back. Said we'll be right back here next season. You never know in the Western Conference how difficult it is, how deep it is. It's not going to be an easy task, but still fantastic season for the Wolves. Not a lot of people were picking them to be in the Western Conference Finals at the start of the season, so I think they really turned some heads. And Anthony Edwards, he's arrived. I think this was the last. Well, he's still young. Playoffs for Anthony Edwards. You know what I'm saying? Where he doesn't quite
Yep.
have the experience and all that. Like next season, oh boy, wheels up on Anthony Edwards and the Wolves for next season.
Yeah, for Edwards, you now have 3 rounds of playoff series in one postseason under your belt. You had the short run last year. We're now going into next year with, I think, folks like you and I are going in with reasonable expectations. Not that he's going to be Michael Jordan, like many have suggested, which is absolutely insane. I think we are in a place where it feels like we're now expecting a repeat-ish performance. I won't say they have to make it back to the West Finals for it still to be a successful season. The Western Conference, as you mentioned, is deep. There's a lot of good teams in the West, but you need to win 50-ish games, be competitive into the playoffs, and go forward. That's now the new bar for the Minnesota Timberwolves, barring something absolutely bananas like they break up the team because they decided it's too expensive. But it didn't. I went to bed, and when I woke up, I already saw like 7 things of cat rumors and trades.
Oh, I
I'll
saw it.
use rumors in quotes because I don't think they're real rumors yet, but it's a lot of speculation out there. Should they trade cat and all this stuff? And it's like that's like the definition of the body's not even cold. Like let's breathe for a minute here and give it time. But the Wolves have real payroll challenges to answer and everything else. But for now, great season for them.
Half the team goes with Glenn Taylor. Half the team goes with with A-Rod, and that's the way it's gonna be two teams now. It's gonna
That's it.
be the Timbers, which I guess is infringing on the MLS, and the
Yeah.
Wolves. And so you're gonna have two and that's how it's gonna get split up.
One moves across the river to St. Paul, and the other
There you
one's
go.
stays in Minneapolis, and there it is. And there's one of our expansion teams, and done.
There's our team right there.
Right.
One side gets Cat, the other side gets Gobert, and off you go. Then they fight over Naz
You
Reid.
actually divvy that team up into two okay starting points for
You could.
two teams if you did. Like
You could.
that's a fun exercise to do. Maybe never, but
Never in August. In August,
Yeah.
you can do that.
Yeah. The number of things we're going to do in August, it's going to need like 87 days of August. So we keep, maybe we'll talk about that in August. Maybe we'll talk about that in August. Like, so we'll see.
We're going to have a busy August. There's going to be a lot of scheduled nonsense in August because we are scheduling a lot of nonsense for August.
Yeah.
We've been doing it all year. So when August hits, we're going to be suddenly busy with all kinds of nonsense. You mentioned Cat. People are already talking about trading him and things like that. Like there's this binary, like you're either the champions or you're just not good enough and you have to change everything type of mentality, right? And so now there's just, there it is. That's proof right there that the Wolves are not good enough and they have to change all kinds of things in order to get better. It was one series. And I think, especially in the West, I think matchups are going to be the way of the future. It's going to be who do you match up with, because there's so many teams that are so close in terms of talent. And the danger can be, while trades and things are exciting, speaking from experience, you can trade yourself out of contention just as easily as you could trade yourself into contention. So when you're looking at it, I think sometimes we discount the value of continuity and the value of organic growth. And that's something that absolutely matters in today's NBA. So we look at the Wolves, the knee-jerk reaction shouldn't be, there it is, decisively. They're not good enough. They better trade Cat, and there's financial stuff to get into. But I don't look at this Wolves team and think, clearly they've got to make big changes or they're not going to win a championship. No, it could just be another year of growth is all they need.
Yeah, it absolutely could be. And I think somewhat to your matchups point, I think there's a world where Denver couldn't beat Minnesota. Minnesota couldn't beat Dallas. And I don't know that Dallas could have beat Denver. So if it had played out slightly differently, you might get Denver in the finals. You might have got Minnesota in the finals if they faced Denver in the West Finals instead of Dallas. Like, it's just sometimes that's how it works out. It feels like every team, even the best teams, have that team that it's like, man, there's those guys. They've got our number for whatever reason that is. Like I think back to just a very recent example was that Celtics team that lost the 22 finals. They couldn't beat the Pistons that year. Like the Pistons kept beating them. And it's like, sometimes there's just that team you can't get past. And for whatever reason, they just, whether it's a matchup thing or they just get in your head or whatever. But yeah, the Wolves should be back. I already saw we had, I'll pull it up here real quick. What does their offseason look like? We'll spend probably more time on that later. But I think they're going to look very similar to what they look like now, because I don't think they're going to go into, we got to trade Cat or we got to trade McDaniels or we got to try to move Gobert or anything like that. And they are, we've talked about it before, for 9 guaranteed players under contract, roughly half a roster. They're already over the second apron. So we're just in a spot where I don't know. Like, I don't know where Minnesota goes to make major improvements. I think it's going to be draft pick, probably grab a couple guys on minimum contracts and fill out the roster that way and run it back more or less. And I don't know that that's the wrong decision to make, because right now it feels like they're so far away because they get killed in game 5 in the closeout game. But all the other 4 games were close. They were right there. 1 or 2 of those games, Cat makes a couple more jumpers and maybe they win. So I don't know. I don't want to see them overreact and get all crazy with stuff. I think if you fall short next year, then we're going to see some moves. We're going to see some changes come. But going into this coming season, run it back for the most part and see if you can get right back at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key thing to remember here, is that they're already a good team. I don't think they need to make these big changes or anything like that. Some comments here coming in. It's a regular season matters. Who would have thought? And seeding is important. Yes and no. Yes and no, because I think in the West, I think in the West it's more who do you play rather than what seed do you finish. There's no guarantee that being the one seed is going to get you the ideal matchup in the Western Conference. That's just the depth and the quality of the conference. So you got to it's and it's going to be difficult to do, but it's about your playoff path more so than what seed you come from. Like again, the one seed does not guarantee your best first round matchup or your best second round matchup the way the West is built right now. So, yes, the regular season matters. Yes, you need to get into the playoffs and everything. But from there, it's about what teams are in front of you and how do you match up with those teams, because I think everybody is so close in this clown car of a conference.
I think it matters to the extent of get out of the play-in tournament,
Yes.
meaning be a top 6 team. That's with the beyond that in the West. I agree. I think it's more like we keep going back to, and it's something JJ Redick said the other day. It's all about matchups. Like that's
Yeah.
what the playoffs ultimately boil down to is matchups. And can you do something better than your opponent? And do they not have a counter for what you do? So I think that is a spot where you I'm in full agreement with you. I do think get into the top 6, that part matters because we're now seeing it making these runs from the play-in tournament. That was, I'm not going to say it's never going to happen again, but that was more of a fluke thing. And especially that both the Lakers and Heat did it in the same year. That
Mhm.
was like, weird. This is weird. And then I do think that gave some people the impression of, well, you just got to get into the play-in tournament. And I know teams I've talked to somebody from every team, and they're like, no, that's not at all how our mindset works. Like, if
They
we
want to be
have
top
to,
six.
sure. But yeah, we want to get top 6. But yeah, after that, I'm with you. I don't know that it matters quite as much, but there is still something to be said for if you're the top seed, part of what you could give yourself is the easiest path to getting through to the finals. Like that's part of what comes with that in theory, right? In that, but it all
Sure.
depends on who's where, who gets eliminated, who gets knocked out, and what. So Stu has thoughts today, man. He's
Stu
ready to
is here
go.
for it. He's doing this thing now where he jumps up on this side and then decides he's going to walk across because he wants his on camera time. He's not happy
That's
just
it.
being off to the side anymore. I don't know. He encroaches on my space. He's trying to kick me out. People in the comment section yesterday were talking about how excited they are to see Stu every time and how they just listen to our show, and then when they hear us talk about Stu, they
They
click
go
the
find it.
tab on
Yep,
over on YouTube. So they come
I
they
love it.
turn it on to actually watch when Stu is on. So in other words, the cat has usurped us as the star of the show.
It's pretty soon here. Maybe in August, Front Office Friday will just be Stu Cam, and we'll just
I'm
turn it
just
on
gonna
and we'll
follow
let him
Stu.
be. I'll try to get Tatum to sit in the seat here and leave him up there, and the two of them can just sit there and stare at the camera.
All right, let's get to some of our questions here. Eddie said, Clippers are crazy wanting to keep Kawhi and PG, or he puts a question mark. So are they crazy? Better sense to sign and trade Paul George and Harden at this point and hope to get back picks. Excuse of keeping them because of the new arena is lame because they're not getting new fans. LOL. Well, that aside, like I don't know what are you getting back if you sign and trade Paul George? Who are you signing and trade him to? And you have to keep in mind those teams that are above that first tier apron, which is like a third of the league right now, aren't available, right? You can't you would trigger a hard cap at that first tier apron, so you can't
Yep.
do that. They can't accept them via sign and trade. So I don't even know what the sign and trade market would look like for Paul George. I don't know that the Clippers get better by trading him. I'm sure they would prefer to trade him than lose him for nothing, but I don't I just don't see a path for actually moving on from Paul George and improving the team. And that's what they're worried about. They're worried about right now with Kawhi trying to win, and they think Paul George is the best bet to do that. And I don't think they're wrong in that. I don't see how they trade him and improve their chances to win right now.
Yeah, I the other thing too is you still have Kawhi. So then
Yeah.
if you're doing that, you might as well trade him too and really start all over. I don't the new arena thing, it's not about new fans. It's about you don't want to open your new arena like with a sad sack team that's like
Right.
not going to win more than 20 games. Like they want to be a playoff team. Like they want to be in a spot where where they'll be okay moving forward. So I sign and trade Harden. I don't think you're getting anything for him. I think any team that could bring him in that way would just probably do it, and they're not going to send back a lot of value. He doesn't have that kind of value now at this point in his career. Paul George, it's maybe a little bit different, but I don't know that anybody's given up a bunch of picks for him either. Like I think your goal would be, let's do a balancing trade where we're taking back some players and go. But I don't know. I don't think that's not the direction I would go. Let's just put it that way. I would just re-sign both guys, hope to be better, and go. But I'd be very cautious about how I do it. I said this yesterday: give Paul George more money than give him a no trade. That's an easy answer for me. I would not do a no trade clause for him if he hits free agency, and then with James Harden, just bring him back and see what you can do. See what kind of team you can be, because you're not in a spot yet to reset fully.
Yeah. You're just, that's not where you're at if you're the Clippers. And all right, let's get to a few other questions. Actually, before we do, I do want to mention, everybody, we did open up the Basketball Bulletin channel. I'm going to put a link in the description there. If you guys wouldn't mind subscribing, we're going to have you guys know our Basketball Bulletin Substack, which we do keep all kinds of content on, basketballbulletin.substack.com. We have started up a channel that coincides with the Substack, and some of the videos are going to be posted over on the Substack as well. But do me a favor, go subscribe to the Basketball Bulletin YouTube channel as well. I'm going to have something else out on there tomorrow. There's already 3 things up there right now, so go give that a look. Speaking of which, a good question, and you highlighted this one, Keith. Where is it? Here we go. Andrew said, our 2 first apron teams, who I've said, look, essentially, you're third of the league that is above the first apron, they can't trade with each other. If they get a third team involved and dump extra salary, is that allowed? If you have both the above the apron teams are taking back less than they're sending out, and the extra salary in the trade winds up on that third team, that gets very complicated and very difficult to logistically and realistically actually pull off. But would that be permissible under the new league rules?
Yeah, that's fine. The rule is as simple as you cannot take back more money than what you send out. So if you're sending out 50 million, as long as you wanted to, if you're sending that 50 million off to a third team, let's say in this case, like Philly has a ton of cap space. Let's say you're dropping 50 million on Philly. They're not in that position, but we're just going to use them as the example. You drop 50 million on Philly, as long as you're not taking back any more than that. If each of the other 2 teams took back $245 million players or whatever, then you're fine, because you took back less than what you sent out. So as long as you're doing it that way, you're perfectly fine. So that is a way around it. We could see some teams do that. I don't think that's going to be all that common, just because I don't think, especially this summer, the teams with cap space, they're not sitting there as like, please dump your contracts on us while paying us in draft picks, except for maybe Detroit could go that way under Trajan Langdon if he's like, hey, there's no way to build this thing quickly, so we're going to take a longer term approach. But yeah, we'll see.
All right, let's go here. Jeremy said the Clippers need to be talked about more as being a terrible failure after all the hype of Kawhi and Paul George to end up with nothing is ridiculous. I mean, a lot of that's been injury related. Every time they get to where they want to be in the playoffs and everything, they get injured. And then infamously, Keith, I'm incredibly biased in this, so I try to not be too, but I still think it's ridiculous that Clippers players are saying, "Oh, we just didn't feel like playing anymore in the bubble when they blew a 3-1 series lead." We've seen multiple former Clippers now say that, but they had a real chance that year. They were one of the top teams in the league that year. Every other year, it's been injury after injury after injury after injury, and we've never really gotten to see what this team can be. And they just keep, Kawhi gets hurt. Everybody's been getting hurt. So, yeah, look, this team had high hopes of being a title team, right? Patrick Beverley said the next 4 years are mine and everything like that. Has not been the case at all. They have not gotten to where they want to go. Still an extremely talented team, and they can be dangerous at any given moment. But luck has not been on their side in the postseason.
Yeah, I think it's the reality is they have not achieved what they wanted to with this core grouping around Kawhi and PG. We can the bubble thing, that's just stupid. That's ridiculous. It's not,
Yeah.
I don't buy that for a minute. But then all the rest of it, yeah, we can call it injuries, and that is clearly a big part of it. But whatever the end result is, we're going to look back at it as with those guys, they made one conference finals, and that was it, right? The 2021 conference finals. Everything, they missed the playoffs the next season, and then 2 first round outs after that. So not good enough. Not where they needed to be after adding those guys. So yeah, I don't think that's it at all. I mean, I get it. They did that, but also you signed Kawhi knowing Kawhi had an injury that the Raptors, better than anyone else had, managed him through. And Paul George has an injury riddled track record coming in, both with the Pacers. Really, ever since he broke his leg, he hasn't been the most healthy guy. So you sign those kind of players that put you in a position where you better build a team that can sustain when those guys are out, and they haven't been able to do it. And then the guys got hurt at the wrong times too when we're heading into the postseason.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll see. I mean, they've got deep pockets, but the new CBA was in part aimed at them. It was primarily the Clippers and the Warriors to try to stop them from just spending. I mean, we talked about this, what was it, a week ago, about if there was a league with no salary cap whatsoever, the Clippers would just have all the top guys because Steve Ballmer he's the richest owner in all of sports by a ton. It's like unfathomable, fathomable, as difficult as it is to say, how much money he has. They could just pay whatever they want to any player and have everybody. But that's part of why the CBA was brought into play. All right, let's get to this. Does a first round pick have value money wise in a trade for salary matching? No, as long as it's a pick. Once it becomes a player and they sign that player, then yes. But up until that point, no. And even once, Keith, if you draft a player, so correct me if I'm wrong here, you draft a player. Let's say you draft Bob, and you draft Bob with the 5th pick in the draft, and then you trade him on draft night. You trade his rights prior to actually him inking that deal. Still counts as zero salary at that point, right?
Correct. Yeah, draft rights, zero, count as zero. Draft picks themselves count as zero. Now they do have a cap hold that goes on your books, but as far as matching in a trade, zero. So if we go back to when LeBron decided to go back to Cleveland from Miami, then it became, I want Kevin Love from Minnesota, because the way for the Cavs, a big chunk of the way they matched salary for Kevin Love was trading Andrew Wiggins. So they signed Andrew Wiggins. Now they signed Andrew Wiggins because they thought they were going to have him, and then LeBron picked to go back after that had happened, because Andrew Wiggins actually played in Summer League for the Cavs before he ended up getting traded. But then what happens is you have a 30-day waiting period after you sign a draft pick. So then you can sign him, you get him, and then you trade him. So you kind of go from there.
All right, let's get to let's go here. This one. Do apron penalties start the second you are over or during the new league year? So it goes into effect as soon as your season ends. So that's the way they did it this year. This year, yeah, is what. So that's to avoid the loophole of, you can only imagine the madness of how many teams would be trying to squeeze in deals and things like that before July 1st. If that was not the case. But so like the Wolves now have to deal with the apron now that their season is over.
Correct. Yep. So what they did is kind of to close it off and say, hey, your last real transaction window under the old rules was this past trade deadline in this past February. Now, the minute your season ended, so all these teams except for Boston and Dallas's seasons are over, you are now subject to the new rules moving forward. So for this case, the Timberwolves, the Suns, the Bucks, those are all second apron teams for right now. That's how they will operate as we go into next season. So it's a little bit of a kind of a crossover period where we're trying to lock people in a little bit here, and then we kind of go from there. So we'll see where how it changes things when we get into the next league year. But for right now, that's how it works.
Keith, I'm just going to throw this question out there, and then I'll be back in like 20 minutes or so. If the Celtics were in the West, what seed do you think they would be?
I think they'd be the 1 seed. They finished 7 games ahead of the next closest team in the league this year. People want to say what they want to say, but they were historically good this season. The best offense the league has ever seen. They had one of the highest scoring differentials the league has ever seen, and they won 64 games. They were 7 games clear of the top teams in the West. Yeah, they would have lost a few more games. I think they probably win like maybe 60 games, but that's still enough. You're not the West isn't 7 games stronger than the East that way. That people we talk about this a lot when we get to the season standings, especially when we're down to like March and April, how hard it is to make up like 5 games in the standings. Sure. 7 games, you're talking about making up 7 games. Like that's you would like that's a remarkable number of games.
Well, you have to play more teams if you're in the West, though. So, like, think of like the second night of a back-to-back. Like, I'm talking about like legit teams, So second night of a back-to-back in January, instead of getting to beat up on the Hornets, maybe you're playing Sacramento, and Sacramento catches you, and so I think that's where people look at. Well, could it be how much of a hit would that take? I think they could be the 1 seed in the West. I think that potential is certainly there, but there's so many good teams in the West that I think that it would wear you down, because the fatigue factor would be part of it too. You don't get the cool, we've got Detroit, it's a night off. You know what I mean? Like, you don't get those games. So I think there would be a difference for sure.
Yeah, what's that? Like Portland stinks. San Antonio was terrible for most of the year. I get it. We all love Wemby, but they still lost 50, 60, almost 60 games. Like, yeah, there's definitely a few, but like, yeah, it's just, it's 7 games. Like, they finished 7 games ahead of everybody. And they, other than Denver, they beat everybody at least, one time through 2. And some of those teams they destroyed. So I think it's weird to me that everybody acts like they showed up and didn't beat anybody all year and just got a full on bye from October straight through the finals. Like, they played all the same teams everybody else played. And other than Denver, they beat all of them. So
no, they got a bye from April into the finals. They didn't get a bye during the season. They got a bye during the playoffs, but that's not their fault. A lot of people turned that on the Celtics. They didn't do that. Like, it's not like the Celtics said, "Hey, the rest of the East, abracadabra, you're all going to fall to pieces right now." But that's where but during the regular season, sure, they had to play West teams. They had to play, but they got to play more East teams, and I think it does matter. But it doesn't change the fact that they are certainly one of the top teams in the NBA. It's hard to say what the fatigue factor would have been and everything like that had they had to play more of these, where, a random night where if you're a little bit, it's just more forgiving. I think that's the bottom line, what it comes down to. Your margin for error is much greater in the Eastern Conference than it is in the West. And that said, they didn't commit very many errors over the course of the season too. Yeah. So
yeah, they went 23-7, I think, versus the Western Conference this year. So, but I think they would have been okay, right? They would have lost a few more games. It wouldn't have been enough to knock them down out of the first seed, but yeah, I don't know. Fine. It's everybody's already decided. Half the people in there have already decided Dallas won the title anyway. So okay, we'll see.
We'll see. I think people are just hoping that Dallas wins it and, saves us all from the dark timeline.
I'll send you all a box of tissues and you can all divide them up between yourselves. All of your tears and crying. Mavs in 4. If it's Mavs in 4, I'll retire from covering the NBA. I won't. I'll be gone forever.
Or at least make it something fun.
Nope.
I'll wear a Mavs jersey or something like that. Don't make it like I'm leaving if it's Mavs in 4.
It's just funny.
No, I get it. I don't think the Mavs will win in 4. I'm hoping the Mavs win, but of course you would expect me to hope the Mavs win, right? That's the way I've seen people putting out Mavs logos that are purple and gold colors
Yeah,
and things like.
you know what's funny? Lakers fans get so pissed when people call them front runners and say they change teams, and then they do shit like that, like put out Mavs logos in yellow and purple. Like, what are you doing? Like, I get it,
What are you
you don't
talking
want
about?
Boston to win, but right. So I know you're aware of the whole when the Warriors were in their dynasty period,
Sure.
all the talk was, well, yeah, that's all the Lakers fans that jumped to Warriors fans, not the real Lakers fans. I'm talking about
Sure.
like the ones who front run. Well, now you're
Uh-huh.
putting out Mavs. Like, you don't do yourself any favors when you do that. Like, oh, we love the Mavs. Like, and this whole rooting for conference stuff, I hate it in college sports. It's the most ignorant, stupid thing I've ever seen. It's dumb in this. I get why Lakers fans are specifically rooting because they don't want Boston to go back ahead in titles. That I fully get that part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's just making the Mavs logo yellow and purple. Like, what are we doing? Like, come on.
I honestly I like it. I think it's kind of funny, and it's just reflect like, hey, I'm not watching my team right now, right? My team's not playing, so I'm going to throw my support behind it. Like, okay, if it was not the Celtics, that's the thing, right? If it was not the Celtics, if it was
Sure
the Bucks in the finals, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care about I wouldn't make a Mavs logo. I wouldn't particularly care which team won. It wouldn't matter. I would just enjoy a good series and all that. But because I have a rooting interest,
Oh,
and
I
by the way,
get
it's
it.
going to create more engagement for the finals, I'm going to be behind the Mavs. So I just thought it was kind of funny. I don't think it's necessarily reflected of a team being a front runner fan base or anything like that. It's just a sign of the rivalry. Look, if the Lakers were in the finals and they were playing the Heat, Celtics fans are going to be okay, maybe not quite the Heat. I should pick like the Hawks or somebody, but Celtics fans would be for the Eastern Conference team. They'd be pulling for the Hawks and
No,
hoping that they win
would
and
not
all that.
care. Wouldn't care. They'd be checked out and
Really?
done. Yeah, 100% checked out and done.
You
Would
wouldn't
not
care
care.
if the Lakers won another championship, but wouldn't mind, you wouldn't bother you at all.
100%. They'd be bothered, but they would not turn to rooting for another Eastern Conference team. Nope. No way.
Really?
It didn't
So
do
you
it
would
in the
and it's
didn't do it in
because
the bubble.
because it's
Yeah.
an East team?
No. Yeah, no way. Didn't
Like,
do it
even
in the
if it
bubble. No,
was
they'd
like,
want them to win, but they're not like gonna start rocking. Like, I saw people all over Twitter posting like, I'm a Lakers fan, but I bought a Mavs hat. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing?
Well,
Like,
then
come on. Like,
I think that part of that is like the player first fans. It's become more acceptable to have gear from like
that's
other
definitely
teams,
true.
and
Yeah,
that's
sure.
certainly part of
Yeah.
it. But that's interesting. And I'll be honest, Keith, I kind of want to live in the world that you live in, because I will be negatively affected by these finals. I was
They would be
hoping.
mad. Don't get me wrong, but they're not going to like if it was like Lakers versus 76ers,
Yeah,
that'd be like your worst case is Clippers versus Celtics. That would be a Celtics fan's worst case, as much as people try to make it out like it's Knicks fans.
sure.
It's not like Knicks Celtics. It's never really been a rivalry because they haven't been good at the same times in their period. Um like that when the Celtics were really good, the Knicks weren't good. When the Knicks were really good, Celtics weren't good. So they've
Uh-huh.
never really met like that. But Sixers have been like that was like my whole childhood growing up. It was get through the Sixers, then get to the Lakers. Then eventually it became the Pistons to get there. But if it was like Sixers Lakers, yeah, they'd be. I don't even know what they'd be like. I think they'd all be. Let's root for the meteor here. Call
Right.
it dumb
Okay.
because they don't want to see either one of those teams win. But they're certainly not going to turn to like, all right, I guess I'm really rooting for the Sixers here. Or if it was like the Heat, like Heat Lakers in the bubble. Now, part of that was the Heat had just beaten Boston, but they are
Right.
not turning around and rooting for the Heat. It's, you know what, we'll let the Lakers tie it up in titles and we'll get after it ourselves. They're not going to turn around and root for the Heat. They do.
Huh.
But part of that is Celtics fans hate the Heat. It's also, remember, we're both older. So
Yeah.
we've had 40 plus years of this. As my daughter reminded us today, we're old. Like she literally said that today. But it
So
is
wait, you and I are old?
no, me and my wife. She called us old. She called us old because we told her she learned today that Alicia Keys is 43 years old. And she was like,
Oh,
whoa, that's
I
so
didn't know that.
old. I'm like, how old do you think we are? She's like, yeah, but like you guys are old. And it's like, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. So to go back to that I think for a lot of younger fans, the Heat are as big a rival for them because some of them are like, the Lakers are just a team we play twice a year. Like they get the history gets told to them,
Mhm.
but for them, it's Miami's ended our season multiple times where we hate them. Like we don't like that team because they keep beating us in the playoffs. And I know a lot of younger Celtics fans, they even worked with some of them at points where they're like, no, the Heat are a bigger rival. And I was like, no, they're not. Like there will never be a bigger rival than the Lakers. Like what are we doing? And but for them, they're there. Like they're there for sure.
Now, I think that see, Grape Ape said I held live streams for Wolves versus Nuggets on a Lakers channel to hate the Nuggets. It ain't because it's the Celtics. No, we wanted to talk basketball, and were
Sure.
most people pulling for the Wolves? Yes, but would I care if the Nuggets won the championship? No, not at all.
Our,
I would just
our poor guy asked a question here was a super chat. We just left it sitting because
yeah.
we got arguing about our stupid
we'll
nonsense.
we'll get to that, but
Yeah,
I
we
do
will.
think I do think that when you look at the rivalry, because I've had people tell me that too. I've had people say, "Oh, well, I don't really care about the Celtics anymore.
Yeah,
I
I
hate the
don't care.
Nuggets more. Or I hate the Suns, or I hate the whoever." That kind of makes me sad because
Yeah,
the league was built on the rivalry, right? Like it was the foundation of all of this. Prior to Lakers Celtics, prior to the 80s, the NBA finals were on tape delay. And for people who don't know what that means it wasn't actually broadcast live. It
yeah.
means you had to
It was
watch it
on
after
at
the
like
fact.
10
And like
o'clock at night. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So it was the whole league was really built upon this great, incredible rivalry. And so that's why that's always going to be to me, I'm always going to, and the Clippers have kind of risen up just because they've been that annoyance that is constantly there. Every time you turn around, they're there like jabbing at you. So it's the Clippers and the Celtics right now are kind of like the two. And I get it. You've got more of the 76ers. You've got the Heat. You've got these other teams. Like, I don't care if Denver wins it. I don't care if Portland wins or whatever. That doesn't bother me at
Yeah.
all. For me, it's anybody but the Clippers or the Celtics is usually my mantra going into the playoffs. So
The
that's the
Clippers
side I
thing's
look
kind
at
of
it from.
funny too, because even that's somewhat newer. Because
It's newer.
when we
Yeah.
were kids, the Clippers stunk.
Yeah.
They were literally the joke of the league for until
Forever.
what 15 years ago, I guess, in that
Yeah.
range. Like they would every once in a while they'd have a nice season and be like, oh, that's cute. They made the playoffs and they'd get bombed out in the first round and off we'd go. And yeah, so even that, I feel like you know better than I do, but I feel like that's a little newer. Then when I say newer, like last decade-ish newer with that one. But yeah, it's yeah, yeah, it's weird to me when I did same as you when I get Celtics fans that are like, yeah, the Lakers, it's just man, I don't like they just don't really care. And I'm like, I don't get that. Like I can't wrap my head around that. Maybe that is just how it is now. Like you said it too, there's so many player fans now
Yeah.
that they're gonna jump from team to team as the players
Right.
change teams, and maybe they do care about all this stuff less because once their player is out, their interest then goes to like I'm just a general
To
fan and
somebody.
don't
Yeah,
really
they're gonna
care.
jump to somebody else, which it's like I've got people who tell me like, oh, I really didn't want I don't care if the Celtics win. I just really don't want the Warriors to win. I'm like, the Warriors? Who
Yeah.
cares about that? Why? Oh,
Yep.
Steph versus LeBron. That's what they care.
Yep.
It's just a different lens to look through. Anyway, okay. Let's get into this question here. Keith, do you buy any reporting
Yeah,
from the Athletic yesterday about them, speaking of the Warriors, they're talking about the Warriors here, trading the core and not being close on a deal with Clay? That
Um,
was going around.
yeah, I mean, I buy
I
it
think it
to
was
the
Anthony
extent.
Slater.
Yeah, it was from Anthony Slater. Yeah, it was kind of a just a general like check in on where things are at. I think we're gonna see a lot more of those over the next week because all of these outlets are gonna be content dry because there's no games to discuss for a week until the finals do start. So I think you're gonna
Mhm.
see some more of this stuff pull forward with this stuff. So I I think trading the core to me, they're not going to trade Steph. Clearly, that's not going to be a thing unless Steph says trade me. And then I don't
Right.
think we're going to see. I don't know that. I don't think they'll trade Draymond either. Partially because I don't know that anybody's stepping up to say we want him. that much. Not that that means he's bad. I just think other teams are like, that's your thing. You can have him and figure all that stuff out. I think not being close with Clay, yeah, but they don't need to be close with Clay today, right?
No,
You've got a month to
that's
get close with Clay.
yeah, it's like the various reports that we've heard on that, like the whole Mike Brown thing. Well, they've got time to figure this out too. It's not like they have to be in the same spot right now. They're gonna. It's kind of like we hear. What was the saying again? Something like, deals are crazy. You know, values crazy in December for the trade deadline. It's crazy in January, and then it gets realistic in February. Something to that. I'm completely
Yeah, they start
paraphrasing it
way up
badly.
here. Everybody comes down, offers come up, and that's
Exactly.
how the deal's made.
That's what's going to happen here as we get closer to actually players being able to sign with teams. I think Clay and the Warriors will move closer together during the month of June, and then we'll see. We'll see if they ultimately come up with something. I think they probably will, but I thought the Athletic article was interesting that it seems more possible, at least, that Clay could wind up somewhere else, and maybe that's Orlando, maybe that's Detroit or wherever. I don't think Detroit really, but Orlando, Philly
could make
maybe
sense
somebody
for
like
them.
that.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a year ago. I would have been like, nah, they'll just get it done. They'll keep them and they'll go. But yeah, I don't think. Yeah, it's a weird spot. Now it's good. It's so interesting that Clay, PG, Jimmy Butler. Months ago, we would have been like, none of those guys are really in play. None of them will go anywhere.
Yeah.
Now we're kind of like, maybe. Like it seems like things are changing. Maybe it all slides back to they're all going to stick around and they'll just stay where they are. But yeah, I do think it's been a little kind of like the change in all the reporting around that, everything you hear when you talk to folks, everything you read is none of that stuff is as locked in as maybe we thought it was.
Yeah. Well, maybe even Cat. He's back. He's back. All right, let's go here. Tony said, great show. Does a team get hard capped to the first apron if sending cash to a team to move up in the draft to buy a pick? So let's pull up our handy dandy sheet here.
Yeah.
That helps us break down what the different penalties are. And so if you are sending cash out in a trade, you look at that angry red column there. Second apron hard cap would come into play if you send out cash in a trade. So if you're above the second apron, you cannot send cash in a trade. So first apron teams still can send cash, but if they do so, they will not be able to cross that. I don't recall the exact number, but it's essentially $189-ish million.
And you were almost right there, 189.5. We'll give it to you. Because with rounding, you could round it down to 189.
Sure.
So I'll give it to you. Yeah, there's about a 10, almost $11 million difference between the first apron and second apron projected this year. Between the tax and the apron, it's about $7.5 million. So if you send out cash, you become hard capped at the second apron. If you're already over the second apron, you can't send out cash.
All right.
And this is part of why I put this together.
So helpful.
Mostly because you were like, can you give me something to help
it
with this?
It was driving me crazy because I was looking at everything and I was thinking there has to be something out there that shows this like graphically where it makes sense. It just puts it all together because so many different things that I saw would say you can't aggregate players in a trade among other penalties, right? And wouldn't actually put all of it together. And I'm like, well, I want to start really knowing this stuff and adapting to this. I need everything to be accessible. So I was so thankful that you did this. I have been staring at this thing for so long, Keith. I have referred back to it so many times. It's so helpful.
And the thing is too, that I keep saying is just to kind of explain the complications part of this is we went from 3 things could hard cap a team to now there are 10 items that can hard cap a team at either the first or second apron. So, and somebody asked me if a team is hard capped at the first apron, are they also hard capped at the second apron? I don't want to be insulting, but yes, like you can't be hard capped at a lower number, but then exceed the higher number like that.
Right.
Sometimes I feel like we failed educating our youth on certain things. I get it.
This stuff past this point.
Yeah.
So are you then technically hard capped at the point past that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure, but
If
you
I
can't
drive
get there
past your
anyway.
house, did I go further if I drive to the next house over? Like, I don't know. Did you? I don't know how you came in. But yeah, weird situation with all that stuff. And I get it. It's complicated. So I'm never going to beat up on anybody for not fully understanding all of this stuff because it's hard. And
It's
quite
job
frankly,
security
exactly. It keeps me gainfully employed.
There you go. All right. Daniel said, what top player is no one talking about that might be moved this offseason? Well, if we talk about him, then your question gets.
Yeah, we've ruined your question.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
It's like, what happens if Pinocchio says, I never lie? Right? Like,
it's funny because like every team I'm like quickly glancing through, like everybody's part of it is because things like trade rumors and all that stuff are so prevalent and drive so much of the conversation. It's hard to find somebody who doesn't get talked about, right? It's like that becomes harder. Or then somebody's like, okay, but they're not a top player. So I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that question. I don't know that there is one, I guess.
Yeah, I think is it possible that we get surprised and there's that kind of out of nowhere the RKO that hits us from the side and we weren't expecting it? Yeah, for sure. I mean, there could be the what? We didn't even know this guy was on the market type of trade. But from the guys that make sense, at least, because we try to wrap our heads around what makes sense for a team to do or not do. It's guys like, like Zach LaVine. Would the Bulls be willing to trade him? Probably. Are there going to be landing spots for him? Probably not.
Yeah, but I think they're definitely going to try to trade.
They're going to try, but
all right, I'll give you.
Those are all known ones.
Chris Middleton.
Like Chris Middleton. Okay, that's a good one.
Now, is he a top player? Like that's then all right. I guess I could see if people like he's not a top player, but that's somebody just because of the Bucks situation. They could maybe somebody in the chat put Ben Simmons. That made me laugh. Not because just whatever. We'll move it.
So. All right. Let's go here. Honestly, is Bronny a real viable draft pick or solely like LBJ's kid and taking a spot from a player with better talent? I think he's a real draft. I think he's a real second round pick.
Correct.
I think that's what he is at this point. I don't. And second round, there's literally guys in the second round that try not to get drafted, like because they want to go to a specific team. So that's not saying a lot. I'm not saying he's this great talent, but I think he's a real draft pick. I think he gets way more attention because he's LeBron's kid, but and I think that's clear. But I think he's an actual NBA talent, and that's where I don't want to see, regardless of where he winds up going. I don't want to see a team use him as leverage. I want to see if a team wants to draft him and say, hey, if we get LeBron, great, that's fine. But I think it would be unfortunate for him if he winds up getting drafted to a team that only wants him for leverage and doesn't care about developing him. And I hope that's not the situation he winds up in.
Completely agree with all that. I will say I do feel a little bad for him the way now we're starting to hear some people say he could be a first round pick. And that's going to put, if a team does that with the idea of maybe we can get dad to come over too, I think that becomes a situation where now you've put the kid in a bad spot because you picked him in the first round. And regardless of strength of draft, people have expectations for first round picks. And he's not a first round player right now. Could he develop into that down the line? Sure. I was actually our guy, Bryce Simon, who does a lot of contributions at the Basketball Bulletin. Sign up if you're looking for scouting reports because he's got them all up there. All the guys you could want to know with that. So I think what is really interesting when we were talking about where he said, yeah, I could see him developing into a good combo guard that can play defense and hit shots off the bench. I can also find 30 other kids who could do that too. And that's the challenge, right? Like that's the thing where if he gets picked in the first round, it's no longer a he could, it's a he better do these things. Otherwise that becomes a wasted pick to some extent. So I think he might end up being a pretty good player. I had to laugh today. Did you see the headline was Bronny rising in ESPN mock draft? Did you see it?
Yeah. You sent me that text. I don't know if you did this too. You sent me that text and I read it and my response was in my head and I
Yep.
got sidetracked by other things. And in my
All
head,
the time.
I completely sent that text. And I went
Yep.
back and I looked and I went, oh, damn, I never responded. In my
Yeah.
head, I definitely responded to that. And I sent what I thought was in my head. I just didn't actually make it to the screen.
So for anybody who hasn't seen this, the headline is Bronny rising in mock draft. He went from being mocked as the 54th pick to the 52nd pick. Like, I mean, sure, I
He
guess
did
that's rising,
rise.
but like, what are we doing? So that's the challenge, I think, is, it's I feel a little bad for him throughout this entire process now. I just land in the right spot where he can develop his game. I think he can play more than he has shown. I think he will develop. I think his body will fill out. Somebody said Gary Payton could be a good comp for him.
So, yeah,
Yeah, I think that. Yeah,
that was what
yeah.
I
I think
saw as
they're
his
the younger
ceiling.
one. I think that's probably not bad. Davian Mitchell potentially. Yeah,
Sure.
that's in that range. I think he's going to be I think he'll play a little bit bigger than Davion Mitchell. So probably more like Gary Payton II, who is super good athlete, can really get after it defensively and kind of go from that.
All right, let's get to this one. What other NBA podcasts do you guys enjoy? I mean,
NBA Next podcast by Spot Track.
There you go.
Because I'm on it. No, I mean I like the Low Post, the Hoop Collective. I enjoy that one. I really like Dunked On quite a bit, but that show's like made for me and like the things I'm most interested in the NBA. Those are probably my three regular listens. Or those three each week. Every once in a while, I'll jump in and out of other ones. Lakers Nation, that one's pretty good. Raptors, is it Raptors Nation?
Yeah, Raptors Nation. Yep.
Yeah, I like that one too. That's
those are some good guys.
Subscribe to those too. Yeah. I like the host of Lakers Nation. He's a good guy.
Most of the time. So when it comes to other podcasts, like I'm with you. I listen to like Low Post, Hoop Collective, things of that nature. But I'll get people to say like, oh, do you listen to this? Do you watch this? Do you watch that? So, there's so much you can't keep up with all of it. And there's a decent amount of time where I'm like, I need something that's not basketball right now. I need to listen. And I typically wind up turning to fantasy football. So I'll listen to like Fantasy Footballers podcast or something like that. Dynasty Nerds, whatever. I'll listen to something like that when I'm just like, man, I just need a break from basketball for a little bit. And that's, every once in a while I'll do that. But yeah, I tend to stick to like the main NBA podcasts, and that's what I go with.
I'll say somebody asked like, what about Bill Simmons? Boston guy here going to answer this question. I'll listen to him when he's doing NBA stuff with NBA people who will kind of check him. So I like Ryan Russillo doesn't let him fire off a take without then like being like, well, wait a minute, what are you saying right now? So I will listen to that sometimes. And if he has Zach Lowe on, they kind of do a few times a year, Home and Homes, I'll listen to him then because Zach's like, well, wait a minute, that's like insane what you just said. Like, explain yourself. When he just is like firing off like his stuff, then I just it's same with you. Like, I don't have a lot of time. One of the I do for my basketball podcasts, there are two that I go to pretty regularly. I like all of the Ringerverse stuff. That's a very regular listen for me when I'm like, I need just something that's not basketball. And I really like WTF with Mark Maron because I like that he interviews a lot of different people that like I would never listen to do an interview outside of listening to that. And I find those to be highly entertaining when they interview those folks.
Nice. Those are good ones. All right, let's get to this. Oh, somebody asked, Keith, will you bring the NBA Next Pod to YouTube and take questions like this via Super Chat? I don't know if you guys have plans for that or not.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's not in the plans right now. Never know what will happen, right? That could change down the line, but for right now, no. I mean, we got to get the listenership up on that show anyway. So if you guys want, go subscribe to the podcast. You can find anywhere you listen to podcast that's out there. And we Scott and I get really nerdy about stuff. We get like even nerdier about the numbers than we do on this show, because this show we try to keep it a little higher level, but we try to get very deep into finances there, but we don't talk a lot about games and that kind of stuff. It's mostly
Right.
about the financials and those kind of things.
I don't know if you guys have heard, but Studio Stu has been on one. He has been he's been yelling at me, wanting. I think he wants lunch. We'll wrap this up in just a moment here, but
close. Yep.
yeah, we'll save some of these questions. One thing that I wanted to mention, your no cap also said I sent you guys a super chat and you skipped it. We don't always go in order of the questions when they come in. We try to have some kind of flow to it. So
sometimes if we're
that
already on a topic, we'll pull up the next one about that topic.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Let's go here. What are some landing spots you like to see for Brandon Ingram? And can you explain how a team can use the MLE as a trade exception? Okay, so while I'm saving some of these super chats, because I think this will probably be our last one, so we can put them on our next show. Keith, you want to get into the MLE thing, and then we can talk Ingram landing spots?
Yeah, the MLE, it's actually pretty simple. So the non-taxpayer MLE this year, I'll use that as the example. It's almost 13 million. Excuse me, this season. So what happens is you can trade for a player who fits within that number if you haven't used it, or whatever you have left of it. If you have 7 million left, you can do 7 million of that. MLE is a trade exception, so that it works just like a trade exception does. Can't combine it with anything else. It can't combine the MLE and the biannual, the MLE and another trade exception. You can't do that. You can only use it by itself. But instead of it being used just to sign players, you can now use it as a trade exception, which I think is a nice thing for teams to have available to them down the line to say, hey, we have no other way to get this guy. And I think it's maybe even potentially a way you might see some teams kind of work around some of the buyout stuff if they don't want to restrict themselves to being hard capped, because that's now a thing as well. It could be, hey, let's try to get this guy through this, but the guy has to make more than the MLE, so maybe not. We'll see how that all comes together, but I do think we're going to see teams potentially use those some. Still, so far, the only GM I've actually heard reference it openly was Monty McNair of the Kings, which maybe tipped his hand a little bit. That was something he could be looking at doing, but we'll see with that.
Yeah,
Somebody
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's a nice tool to have to be able to do something like that.
Yep. Ingram,
and then Ingram
like
landing spots
for Darius Garland. I think that's a smart swap for both teams. I think that could really help both teams quite a bit moving forward. Cavs would need to go get a point guard then, but you probably find a point guard that's pretty decent that you could bring in. But I kind of like that swap there. But yeah, I mean, if Philly wanted to go get him, I think he could be a guy who could really, if Utah decides, hey, we want to really get in the mix here, I think he's a guy who could help. I think they're kind of aiming higher maybe than that. The biggest challenge with Ingram is, do you want to pay him next year? Like, that's the problem. What is he going to demand on an extension or a new contract? And that's where it could get a little weird with him with trade value.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. I could see Philly wind up being a landing spot for him if, you would have to find a way. I think the Pelicans are going to look to upgrade with him, so it'd probably have to be a 3-team trade. But I could see Philly, absorbing his salary, using all that cap space that they've got. That would make sense, especially if their main targets are Paul George and Jimmy Butler, and those aren't available. Ingram would be kind of the next step along those lines. I think the Cavs thing almost makes too much sense, to where it makes so much sense that it won't happen. You know what I mean?
It's either those things make so much sense they don't happen, or they're like, that absolutely was how it went down, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh, we all saw this coming. Somebody asked if I'd like him on the Magic. I think that's too much duplication of what Paulo and Franz already do. I think the Magic can use their flexibility in other ways. I think that would be better.
All right. The super chats we didn't get to, I will save for our next show. One last time.
Somebody asked if we'll be live for both days, of the draft. Definitely the first round. We'll see on the second round. If we are, we may, depending on what else, everybody's it sounds crazy to say this, but we're a month out, so everybody's still finalizing and working out plans. But we will do a show. If he can't join us live, we're definitely going to do an after show at some point after the draft, like within the couple of days after. We're going to bring Bryce Simon on, and we're going to really get into and break down a lot of the stuff that happened into the draft.
And that's going to be a lot of fun for sure. All right, guys. Oh, apparently they can hear Stu. Stu,
I can hear him now.
Like,
yeah.
You can hear him. He
done.
is like, it is past my lunchtime. I am angry. Let me out.
You two morons can argue Celtics Lakers later. Get it. I need to eat. Let me out of here.
He is so over it right now. All right. I'm going to go let him out. But I appreciate all of you guys for joining the show. Don't forget, check out the Basketball Bulletin, the YouTube channel that we just started up. Give it a follow. Again, there's already 3 videos that are up there. You can go check those out, and more coming this weekend. All right, everybody. I do appreciate all of you. Till next time, have a fantastic, fantastic weekend. See ya, and stay safe.